Okay, question 3 is going to be a very, like, you're going to see common questions like this in this format, most likely on quizzes and exams. So, hint, hint, a question like this may be on your exam, or something in this format that deals with presenting you a question with like a number and then some percentages. Because you already seen a question like this from pretty much yesterday, right? Like day 5. So let's start by reading it and then seeing what information we can pull. So John invests $30,000. Okay, doesn't really tell me much right now, but it tells me he invested $30,000. Some at 4% and the remainder at 7%. If he earns $1,560, how much did he invest at each rate? Okay, so what we're looking for is how much did he invest in at each rate. In this case, it means when I read at each rate, it means he invested in more than one. And when it says some at 4% and the remainder at 7%, I can see that he invested into two types of investments. So let's start by labeling first. I would probably start labeling, like letting certain variables happen. I'm going to let x equals to investment number 1. And I'll let y equal to investment number 2. So now let's see if I can form some equations from this. So the first equation I'm going to form is, well, John invests 30,000. Okay, so I know from that 30,000, some of it will be investment 1, and some of it will be for investment y or investment 2. So I'm going to say to form my first equation, x plus y equals to $30,000. Because I know he invested in investment 1 and investment 2. I just don't know how much he invested into investment 1 compared to investment 2. I don't know how much value that would be. So this would be my equation 1. Now let's look at finding it in a second equation. So from the information I have, it says some of that investment was invested at 4% and the remainder invested at 7%. And he earned 1,560. So from this question, I can probably form an equation such as this. So because I know that 4% is, as a decimal form, 0.04, I can say 4% for investment 1 plus 7%, so 0.07 for investment 2 would equal how much I've earned so far in investments. So that would be 1,560. So now this would be my equation 2. And to make sense of this, so because I read that some of the investment was at 4% and the remainder at 7%, I know that this is like pretty much the amount of interest, right? So interest times the amount I invested in. So for example, if I don't know what X is, right? But let's say X is like 10,000 or something. If X is 10,000, what's 4% of 10,000? Like how do I get 4% of 10,000? I would take 4% and multiply it by 10,000. And that should give me my value of the 10,000, like 4% of like that 10,000. So in this case, it would be 0.04 times 10,000. That's if X was 10,000. Now I don't know what X is, right? I don't know how much John invested for X. So I would just say 4% times the value of X, which I don't know what it is. And then for Y, it'd be 7% times the value of Y, which I don't know what it is. But I know that the total money that I've earned from 4% of investment 1 and 7% of investment 2 equals to $1,560. So that's why that will be my equation 2. And once again, equation 1 was just the total amount I invested for investment 1 plus the total amount I invested for investment 2 equals to $30,000. Now again, I don't know how much investment 1 is or how much investment 2 is, what I'm trying to do is find out how much each investment is. So let's find out now. I can either use substitution, elimination, or isolate for one of my variables such as y and graph this system of equations. For myself, I'm just going to use substitution here. Okay, so if I use substitution, let's start with equation 1 because I can isolate for either x or y fairly easily, it looks like. So I'll start with equation 1 and I'm going to isolate for y in this case. So I have x plus y equals to $30,000. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides. And if I do that, I should get y equals to negative x plus 30,000. Okay, and again, that's still equation 1. I just changed it up a little bit. Now for equation 2, I would plug equation 1 into equation 2, but since there are decimals that I'm working with, I actually want to get rid of those decimals first. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to get rid of some of my decimals. I'm going to multiply equation 2 by a number that can get rid of my decimals. In this case, that number happens to be 100. So I'm going to say 0.04x plus 0.07y equals to 1560. I'm going to multiply each of those terms by 100. So times 100, times 100, and times 100. And remember, the reason I'm multiplying every term by 100 is because when you multiply or divide, you have to do it to every term in the equation. So now that I multiplied every term by 100, I should be getting 4x because 0.04 times 100 is just 4, plus 7y because 0.07 times 100 is 7. And now I have 1,560 times 100. In this case, I would just add 2 more zeros to the end of 1,560. So that should get me 156,000. And this would be my equation 2 that I manipulated. Now I want to take my equation 1, where I isolated for y, and plug it into equation 2, which I manipulated for. So in this case, I would have 4x plus 7. Now, instead of putting in the value of y, instead of putting in just y, I would put in the value of y, which I found in equation 1. So that would be negative x plus 30,000. Now I would add on the 30. Now I would let that equal to 156,000. Because then that way that matches up for equation 2. Okay, so now let's try to simplify. And the first thing I want to do is get rid of my brackets. So let's do that. So I have 7 times negative x, which in this case honestly should just be negative 7. So I'm going to erase that sign here and just add in negatives. Oops. I wanted the blue ink. Okay. Negative 7x. Now 7 times 30,000 would be 210,000. And that all equals to 156,000. So now I want to add up my like terms. So with regards to like terms, I can add 4x to negative 7. So in this case, 4x plus negative 7, or I can just say 4x minus 7x. That would be negative 3x. That would be negative 3x. Okay. So now with negative 3x, that would be negative 3x plus 210,000 equals to 156,000. What I can do here is I can isolate for x, so I want to move 210,000 to the other side. So I can subtract 210,000 from both sides. And if I do that, I should be left with negative 3x equals to, now we have to do some math here. What's 156,000 minus 210,000? And the answer to that should be, let's see, 4, so that's 54 or negative 54,000. Okay, so now that I have this, I want to isolate for x by getting rid of my negative 3. So I would divide every term by negative 3. So divide negative 3, divide negative 3. And if I do that, I should get x equals to, because negative 3 divided by negative 3 cancels out, so I only get 1, so I have x on one side now. Now I have negative 54,000 divided by 3, which should get me a positive number because I have two negatives, so I should get 18,000. Okay, so x equals to $18,000 is what I'm getting. So let me box that in. And now I want to find y, so the value of investment 2. So I scroll back up. Okay. I guess I can use my plug x back into my manipulated equation for y, which is y equals to negative x plus 30,000. So let's do that. So y equals to negative x plus 30,000. If I plug that back in, I would have y equals to negative. And now here's the part I put in the value of x, right? So there's a negative, it's negative x to begin with. So I just put in, I leave the negative on the outside. I put in my value of x, which is 18,000. Then I add on the 30,000. Now I just do some math here. Negative 18,000 plus 30,000. Which in this case should be positive 12,000 if we do the math right. So we got y equals to 12,000. Let's box that in as well. So if we scroll back up, I'm basically saying that my value of x is 18,000 and my value of y is 12,000. And that does equal to 30,000 for my first equation. So if that also works, if I plug those values back into my second equation and they also equal 1,560, then these are the correct values for investment 1 and investment 2. Which again, in this case, investment 1 would be $18,000 and investment 2, I guess I'll write it down. So investment 1 would be $18,000. Investment 2 would be $12,000, which I found down here with x equals to 18,000 and y equals to 12,000.